Who feels that sarcasm is a gift? I think all the Australians do, and it's good. Hey, welcome to the team. You just all appeared. That's wonderful. So we all know who they are. Ezra, Victoria, mighty Ezra. Bridge Church, we've got Alice McInnes. She sent me a question to ask, who is my favourite state director? You are, Alice. You are. Exactly. Hannah from New South Wales, from Horizon Church. Yes, I've now got it in my mind, which is cool. Jace Van Vuuren, Queensland. Jace's team's just sitting here, which is good. So Hope Centre, which is awesome. We've got Jordan Keehan and WA, and it's going to be great to hear from these guys. WA.
It's a time delay.
They've just woken up because they were 2 hours behind, and now time zones kicked in and they're with us now. It's fantastic. We had a conversation at our AGM meeting earlier in the week. So the business component of the company of ACC Kids, and we're talking rather than just talking all the business sort of stuff. I'm like, I've been perplexed a little bit, and this. A real heaviness for me within kids ministry over the last probably 12 to 18 months in the direction of where we're heading nationally. On one side, things I see, I'm thrilled about it, and I just think it's exciting. But on the other side, aspects of things I was involved in children's ministry many years ago, I'm like, where's that gone? So let me unpack this a little bit and explain what I'm talking about. When I first started in kids ministry, and I've joked many times here before, it was all these guys in veggie tail ties and weird vests, and it's true, right? Did you ever wear the Marvin the Martian socks or something? No. I resisted. I'm like, no. Did you? Yeah, you would have. Yeah, absolutely. Clark would have for sure. And it used to be and you would go to the expo area and it would just be full of stuff. I'm not saying it was good, I'm just saying there was lots of stuff. And every second person was writing a book on kids ministry. There was VHS, remember them? Yeah. Like, there was video series on kids ministry. There was all sorts of different resources. And we've moved from the Sunday school era, as I've said before, into children's church and the resources. Kidmo came into the nation, and I remember when video curriculum started to become a thing. Does anyone remember Kidmo and use that? It was one of the early video curriculums. Hillsong started to do that. Planet Shakers started to put curriculum out nationally within Australia, and we've all probably used these curriculums and things. Then what happened was we've moved from this children's church focus to when we've become quite leadership focused. And I think this is fantastic. And again, to know where we're going, I think we do have to have a look at where we've been. And one aspect is that the leadership development within our teams has been exceptional. I love looking around, and the comment constantly made over the last few years from keynote speakers is just, it's a room full of sharp, smart leaders. And some that haven't experienced kids ministry or Kidshaper, they probably are still expecting the veggie tail tie type kids pastors or leaders. I don't know what's in their churches, but they just expect kids ministry to be sort of that. But it's leadership. I know within our church, when we're looking to appoint a new kids leader in one of the campuses, the first criteria is not, do you love kids? That may not have to be the first question. You know, are you passionate about kids ministry? The ones that are passionate about being in there week in, week out are going to make great team leaders and great members, but we start to look at leaders, people who can develop teams, people who can manage systems, people who can be all over the safety aspects of church. And I think that's great that we've gone this far in leadership, but I think in some ways we may be pushing the leadership this way, and we're leaving behind aspects of creativity. And this is the preface of the conversation I just really wanted to have, to ensure that we're not becoming almost so corporate, or we're not going so far this way that we're actually missing some aspects of just fun. We're growing children up before they need to be in some way. We're trying to be a little bit too rigid within our teaching systems that if a service doesn't go right, we spend the next 2 hours doing a service debrief and evaluation. I don't care. Like, when do we get to the point that it's like, that object lesson was disastrous? Who's done one of them? Well, you're doing well that you've just done one. I've done so many bad that... Who's been in the middle of the preaching and you're thinking, this has not worked, it's going nowhere. I literally... Abort. It's like, you just want to eject. Just bow your heads, close your eyes. Amen. Let's do a game. You know, you just... Here's what I'm finding though. I'm finding young kids pastors have the inability to even to be thinking, to have planned spontaneity. When the run sheet goes off or the service goes over, they're literally frozen because there's not a whole lot in the kit bag ready just to roll with, because we're too structured and we're too just... So I don't know, hear the tension of my heart here. I don't want to run back for the love of all that's holy to veggie tail ties. Jace, I reckon you'd wear one. And probably make it cool. Yes, you do. Yeah, I know, but you make it cool. It's all good. Now it's just looped all the way around to hipster, and it's cool. You can wear anything. But anyway, it's a different story. Hear the tension here. So today we just want to have that discussion. Start to think through that. I've got a few questions I'd love to pitch to these guys. Basically, someone said... let me just get through. What will be the biggest change in the Australian kids ministry in the next 10 years? Well, when they asked that, I think the biggest move into the next 10 years is sort of what we're trying to unpack here. It says, when you're looking at creative aspects, how are you conscious of raising up young leaders in creativity whilst still preserving a quality of a program? I think even in that question alone starts to look at the priority settings that we're doing, as I said, to the quality of the program, as opposed to allowing young people to get up and just fail. How do you guys manage that on your teams? Ezra, why don't we start with you?
That's a good question. I would think you just have to ask yourself the question, where in all that I'm doing do I allow a percentage where people can fail, and that's totally okay. So in my run sheet, I want stuff to go well, but who am I giving an opportunity where if they don't run that game well, or they thought up an idea and it absolutely fails, we just move on and that's okay. If you give that space, people will fill it.
Right.
So I always just ask myself, where are we being creative? And so in our team, we dream up ideas all year, and we save them for October because that's like our innovation month where we actually outwork projects that we want to create things. Because in our church calendar, October used to be like, whew, kids camps are done, we survived, we're alive. And then it was like we'd just chill. So now we just create a little bit of space and try to outwork some of these projects to be creative so that I don't have to stress all year when I'm busy about trying to be creative. So just creating margin, whether it's in your run sheet or in your church calendar for creativity.
That's really good. Let's unpack that a little bit more. So what you're saying here is that throughout the year, the speed and the pace of what we're doing week in, week out, we're, rather than applying the pressure to ourselves weekly to be creative, to actually get on doing the good job, but allow for time to be creative, which will implement your creativity for the forthcoming year.
Yeah, well, because we tried to be creative like every single week, right? So you're rolling out rubbish and then it's failing and you're like, oh, well, we won't do that again. So you build this culture that says creativity doesn't work.
Right.
As opposed to saying, that's a really good idea. We don't have the space right now, but let's think about that in October. And then everyone has a little passion project because throughout the year, they've had a little bit of space to think about something they want to try. And in October, we're trying to deliver that. So
that is very cool. Very cool. Jace, how do you go in that with your team with around creativity, releasing people into this, but allowing to try and maintain that consistency?
I think, as much as possible, we try to be as prepared as we can. It's not good to release a young leader on the Sunday morning like, hey man, you're on games.
Right.
Like it just sets them up for failure.
That's not on?
Oh, yeah.
take one of them.
Yep.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
I was just saying, as the ministry leader, we try to be as prepared as possible. So that when we have a young leader coming up, they've had a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever, to read through whether we've got someone who's preaching for the first time or someone who wants to insert a really cool idea or object lesson, we're prepared enough for them.
Yeah, right.
So that when they come into that space, it doesn't feel like they've been left in the lurch, like, oh, now I have to do a game, or
Right.
because then they're not set up for success. But when we're giving them stuff with some notice and some time, it means they can come and, some of our young preachers, I'll send their preaching notes through and we'll work on it. But it doesn't help if we're not prepared.
Yeah.
So it's my job to be prepared for the kids coordinators and their job to be prepared for their team.
It really does come down a lot to your calendar management as well as your run sheet management. So knowing who's going to be emceeing or who is preaching out in advance, so you can not, oh, hey, Jordan, good to see you on this morning. Can you do a game? Yeah. Oh, sure. And then you fail, and then it's like, oh, well, that didn't work. So I agree. Someone asked a question. They're saying novelty creates a fun learning experience that allows kids to fun and novelty and in games and aspects of creativity, create an environment where kids can lean in and have fun and learn. But this pressure of constantly doing that, where is the balance between this, Jordan? I'll ask you, where is the balance between keeping the same consistent? Because I know that, for instance, at a particular time when praise and worship finishes or whatever it might be, if the younger kids are going somewhere or if the older ones are moving to the outside or however your program looks, you do it consistently and the kids fall into a pattern where, which helps shape your behaviour management. They're preemptive and learnt behaviours. They know what is next. So there's this element of these learnt behaviours to preempt what's next for kids, but a sense of also creating large creative fun. How do you find the balance in keeping a consistent run sheet, but also mixing it up?
Right. I think debriefing as a team is really important. And then as the leader, reflecting a lot, but then gathering information or feedback or opinions from a wide range of sources. Because if you're trying to get feedback on what you're running in your services and you're only asking leaders, you're doing stuff that the leaders like, but maybe the kids don't. Yeah. So you want to ask the kids stuff, you want to ask the parents stuff, ask your team. When I first started leading our kids' church, I made a lot of mistakes because I was really young and I wanted to innovate too much. So I was like, let's mix this up, let's change this room, change the age group. Why do we pray then? Let's pray here. And a lot of it was like there because it worked. And I sort of like de-gutted it and made a lot of stuff that we ended up putting back in a year later because I was like, that actually made a lot of sense and it works. So don't just go, let's innovate everything. Let's innovate check them in after the service just to mix it up. Some stuff exists because it works.
Great.
So you want to look at the fundamental things, the foundational things that should not change.
Yes.
And then start dressing it up. Because we joke about it with our team, is like you don't want to try and dress up a turd. So like...
Put glitter.
Yeah, so if your kids' church is unsafe, the gospel's not being preached, the leaders aren't passionate, you can put as many cool aesthetic, creative, innovative things around it, but you've really just dressed up a turd. You want to have something great. So... But feedback from a wide range of sources, lots of debriefing, and be as a leader open to getting really negative feedback. So often we don't ask feedback because we're scared of what people say, but you need to be able to do that. Yeah. So, yeah. Even from kids, because a kid will probably just savage you one Sunday and say, I don't like the preaching. You're like, but I preached today. Yeah. And you're like, oh my gosh. So, but you have to do that. You have to do that.
Yeah, we couldn't dress up a turd on the preaching. So it was... Very good. Hey, I'm actually thrown on that, but a lot of questions, literally about 4 or 5, talking about leading into the next space of worship, and how we're leading into worship, and I mean, a new album coming out with Hillsong, which is brilliant. We've got Dan Warlow and different. Have you found worship change? Hannah, I mean, you're in that worship space as well. I know that as a worship leader, but how's worship changed in kids ministry over the last few years? And do you think we've radically changed too far, or do you think we've got a good balance? I know many of us use your Young and Free, or it might be the Planet Shakers, which is great, but our early childhood, where's worship sitting, and what do you think we need to look at in that space?
Well, I reckon there was a time where every kids ministry wanted to have a kids band, and
right.
And if you couldn't have a kids band, you didn't do worship. And I think these days it's become more and more acceptable and common to use YouTube for worship. We use YouTube like pretty much every Sunday, and we use lyric videos because we don't have a big sound and media team. So you click one button and you get the words and the picture and the sound all in one go. And for a kid, that's awesome because they love YouTube, but it kind of releases our team to be able to focus on engaging kids in worship and not trying to make us sound awesome. And, we use a lot of, Young and Free and stuff like that because kids these days, they are into party music and stuff like that. So we make praise just a massive dance party, like a praise party, and then in worship, we get songs that are really easy with lyrics. But I think as well, when you try and if you want a kids band, if I tell my team, I don't want you to be a good singer. I want to teach everyone on my team how to lead kids in worship, because it's not about what your singing ability is or what your musical skills are. It's actually about, can we get these kids to engage in the presence of God and have a God encounter? So I teach them, I don't want you to actually sing. When you have a microphone and you stand in front of the kids in worship, don't sing. I want you to talk to the kids. I want you to talk them through it. Tell them, we're going to encounter God. How about you close your eyes so you don't get distracted, and raise your hands. We're going to reach out to Jesus. Talk them through what it means to surrender to God, and then encourage them. Be like, that's great singing. Jesus loves hearing your voice, and just encourage them and help them engage. And I think more and more we need to just realize, actually, what are we trying to do in worship? Are we trying to make it look cool and sound cool, or are we actually trying to help these kids encounter Jesus? So in whatever way you need to do that, if you have a guitar, awesome. If you have, a YouTube video, awesome. But just, I reckon train your leaders in what do these kids need to do to be able to engage with Jesus.
Yeah, very good. Alice, I'll throw to you just now. I want to ask a question, because you've been in children's ministry a number of years, and we always joke because we have seen these trends come, go, and shift and change. Many years ago, when I first started in kids ministry, and I would have told the story before to a number of kids training conferences and things, but the Lord spoke to me about letting children's ministry be my heart, not my start. So that's when I started out. It was a real defining word for me. Now, I've gone on and I'm now leading a campus with Calvary and doing other aspects of ministry. It doesn't define me to not be able to go and do something else. But it was at the time when I was young, in my early 20s, not to see kids ministry as just the stepping stone to the next opportunity to jump into youth ministry and into young adults ministry. God help me. To jump into campus or a church or whatever it might be. It did ground me. That thinking did help me to always just prioritize that children's ministry is my heart, not my start in what I'm doing. With the swing of leadership this way, it's inevitable. I look across the just the skill set on this stage. It's inevitable that you'll be leading beyond kids ministry. And whether it's overseeing kids ministry and something else, whether you're doing this or you're moved into another area because of the leadership. Here's a bold question, and if you're sitting next to your senior pastor, it's probably the only, you can not answer this question. But who actually has aspirations to do other aspects of ministry outside of kids ministry? Who feels that they may be a campus pastor one day? They may be a business manager. They may do something else. Look, here's the thing. Can I okay it? That's okay. But you have to view what you're doing in the moment as the most important thing of what you're doing. So, I pitched this question, Alice. Longevity is a key. Longevity in children's ministry, because one thing I've seen is that I'm thrilled if I see people who are in children's ministry for 1 to 2 years now leading in another area of their church life. Because you're still moving in the motions of ministry for longevity. What worries me is whatever happened to that? So there's still a high dropout rate within kids ministry. What do you think that, a couple of the keys within longevity that you could speak into there, Alice?
I get asked this a lot. I got asked this morning, what do I see as my next? And I'm not to say I don't have dreams and aspirations, but I am so thankful for the moment that I'm in and the season that I'm in, that I actually just wholeheartedly put myself into the season. I mean, when I was in Sydney only a few years ago, I never thought I'd be outside of Sydney. I never thought I wouldn't not serve the senior pastor I was serving at that time. So I'm totally aware of God can shift and change seasons, and God wants to move us into our next, and God's always got something greater in our future, and that doesn't mean we move out of where we're at, but we've always got the next. So I think longevity, I mean, if I was to write a book on kids ministry or whatever, mine would be about longevity, because I have just actually learned to keep on turning up no matter what the season of life personally I find myself in, whether I'm happy with my leader or not happy with my leader. I've actually just learnt that the key to for me is just to keep on turning up. And so I think, and I said it last night when I hosted, because I really believe we rush forward in life and we don't stay present in the moment we're in. And so I think a key for you right now to see the dream and the desire that you've got for your future is stay planted right in the moment you're in. Have your dream, write it out. The Bible says write it out, put your vision down on paper, but stay in the moment you're in and be faithful with what God's put in your hand in this moment. So when I look across whatever I'm doing on a weekend, and my role has a little bit shifted in the last season, I'm still very involved in kids ministry, but when I look at what's in front of me on a Friday night or a Sunday or during the week when I'm doing what I'm doing, I am present in that moment. And I'm not thinking, well, maybe I'll be a campus pastor next year, so this actually isn't important. This is vitally important for the season God's put me in. And so I believe if we will just be faithful with what God's put out in our hand for now, grab that verse of scripture from last night, be alert, be present, and be right where you are, be faithful with what you've got, because to be honest, God knows the plans, the purpose. He's already got it worked out. He knows the desires of your heart. He knows the big picture dreams you've got. Stay where you are, because in the moment you're in right now, you're actually learning what you need for your future.
You actually can't get to where you're about to go.
You won't get there without being in this moment. And
right.
Sometimes we tried to bypass those things. I'll give you an example. It's got nothing to do with ministry. I've got a 12-year-old and a 4-year-old. I remember when my firstborn, my daughter, was born, and I'd look at her and go, this is boring. Sorry to all the really maternal people. I look at this baby and go, can you do something? Like, is this what it is? Like, we couldn't have kids for a long time, and all I wanted was to be a mum, and then I've got this baby, and I'm like, is this it? This is so... And then she started to gurgle, and I'm like, I can't wait till she talks. I can't wait till she moves, because I was like almost rushing the seasons ahead of me and wanting them to come quicker than they. And now I've got this 4-year-old boy, and I'm like, put a brick on his head, stop him growing, because I want him to. I want to savor every moment. And I think it's exactly the same in ministry. Don't race it ahead. Be where you are, and be because God's got you here right now for a moment. See, even now, some of us are thinking about lunch. Be in this moment. Hey. You don't need to think about lunch, because you just had pork knuckle crackle chips or something. Be in the moment you're in, because God's doing something in this moment, and I actually believe that's a huge key to longevity. Stay where you are now and don't rush it ahead, because you'll get displaced, you'll get despondent. You'll actually feel like it's not happening quick enough for me. Just stay where you are and be where you are until God says.
Yeah, I think it springs out of us trying to even the insecurities or validating ourselves, because is this okay what I'm doing right now? For a long time, this is what God's given you. Then do it well. But if I do more, I do better, I get more. You start dreaming that it's feeding yourself and your ego and but God wants to develop inside of you the character to give you the next. When I get frustrated in where things may not be, then I have to loop back around and look at myself. God, am I listening to the process of what you're trying to teach me? Because maybe you're like, hello, I'm okay, I'm ready to go. You're clearly not. So trying to make sure that character is being developed inside. I could not be doing what I'm doing now 5 years ago. I couldn't be doing what I was doing, next year, right now. It's all the right time. I think that's a great word in the now. Ezra.
I was just thinking along what you were just saying there, and I think often if people are asking all the time, and it will happen to all of us, hey, what's next? Where do you see yourself? If you're not content in the moment you are now, I think you actually need to go back to God and ask him why he's got you here, and sort that out as a conversation between you and God, not you and man.
Yeah.
Because too often people will come and ask that, and if I'm uncomfortable with the question, it's probably because I want to be somewhere else, or I see something that is between me and man, not me and God. And the reason I'm so happy where I'm at, doing what I'm doing, and I love kids ministry is because I've already settled that between me and God, and I don't have to worry about it. So you could ask 1,000 times and 1,000,000 people, it doesn't matter, because it's settled between me and God. And I just think if that's something that you're going through, take it back to God, because you can get wisdom from people, but you'll get answers and contentment from God.
It says in Genesis 21 that it talks about God visiting Sarah, and it says, and the Lord visited Sarah as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah as he had spoken. And there's a key here that God both visits and speaks. And the truth is, if God's visited you, Ezra, and said you're called to be the kids pastor at Bridge, he's visited and spoken, then all the rest around here and how good things are going and whether it's succeeding, whether it's not, whether it's manageable, whether the team's good, bad, or ugly, you've got to come back on the fact that he visited you and spoke about what you're doing. And I agree, if you haven't got that, then you've just stumbled your way in through hanging around the foyer long enough at a church, and you got given a responsibility. But unless you've got a visitation and a strong word from God as to what you're doing, if you don't have that, it's like over the next few days, spend time with God to get this word as to what you're called to do. Because when you're called, then it's the bad seasons come, and they do. It doesn't change. I'm called, and God, you spoke. And this is what I'm here to do. And I think that's helpful for us. I think what starts to happen sometimes is when we start to lead out of when we're not too sure, or when we're leading out of our next, or leading out of insecurity, it becomes hard to manage team. And there's different aspects I've found. And I've been through different seasons of children's ministry. I've been the leader of when I was early 20s and not married, and dating, and then married, and then I was married, no children, and now we've got children. And so the different elements of leading a children's ministry at a younger age, as you're starting to get older, shifts and changes the way that you interact with team, and shifts and changes the way you interact with parents. And I think it's wise to understand this, because as a young children's pastor, I'm going to lead family ministry, whatever that happens to be. It's just a cool name within kids ministry, but let's engage families. But I don't have a family. Then what I'll do is I'll connect with a great couple who are going to help me do this. Well, who's in charge? Who cares? Come on. And again, we get back to this power play of positional church life. Are families engaged? Are kids growing in God? These are the outcomes. Leading teams is important. And I think I look across and we've got some young people leading. Just jumped. I was aimed at you, Alice. We were there once. My question, and I'll throw it, Jordan, I'll start with you. Are you the youngest here?
I'm 24.
Yep.
Yes, you're the youngest.
Leading people that are older than you. I'd like to speak into that, because there's team members out here that have to lead the 56-year-old lawyer who is running such a high-end role in every single day, and then he comes in and we almost, hey, do you mind just getting the blue lid box? And like, it takes planning and thinking, and can you talk into leading people older?
Yeah, I think from my own experience, when I was very young and led the team, I reckon I pushed out all of the older people just with my ideas and the pace. And I'd come from youth ministry, so it used to be like, let's have a team meeting in KFC in half an hour, let's go. And it was like, if you weren't there, it was that culture of like, bro, where's your heart, man? Come on. And then I came into a kids team where it needed to be like, hey, in 6 months, we're going to gather for a meeting. Like, nah. No, but I'm exaggerating, but...
It's the truth.
Is it still
It's
at
true.
KFC?
No. Well, that's another point. Like, it used to be every kids meeting around it was pizza and Pepsi Max, but now it's, salads and a selection of fresh fruit. But no, like... No, but I'm having some fun there. But the reality is like, you have to...
Have you got a gluten-free option?
Sometimes, I think, yeah.
Yeah, good.
Sometimes. But this again, like, I realised I was not doing well in that area. I would like looking after older people on the team. So there was different things I needed to delegate to people that had the maturity to make the calls like that. But the biggest thing is, as a young leader, don't be arrogant. Make sure you're not being prideful. And one of the most important things you can do as a leader is be a blessing to your team and serve your team. And so addressing all the older people with respect. And I had the challenge of saying, man, when I run a meeting, people just don't listen to me. But that's because of half of what was coming out of my mouth was nonsense. And it didn't make sense. And it wasn't clear. So a lot of young people say, people don't listen to me when I run a meeting. And I say, what's your meeting about? I talked about this, talked about this, talked about that. I had to learn to deliver content maturely, really think it through, realise that I don't want to waste these older people's time. Because like you said, you want to have...
Thank you. On behalf of...
Sorry. I should have said older, sorry. 2 letters makes a big difference, my bad.
Aimed at Ian.
But bringing it back in, as a young leader, you do want really capable people on your team, like a lawyer, like someone that's an executive in a company. So to do that, you can't waste those people's time.
Totally.
So you've got to make every meeting count. You've got to make every conversation count. Yeah. Make sure they feel blessed when they leave you. They don't leave going, man, that young punk wants me here out another night of the week. We've got to bless them. We've got to understand them, care about them. And for me, me and Bianca could not have done much at all with our kids ministry. We didn't have an older couple with us, so we've got a couple on our team, Ross and Amber, and they're both
amazing.
Early to mid 30s. They've been a huge blessing. So I think
So old. They are so old. Make sure you get 30-year-old old people on your team.
Stop giving numbers.
But Alice, I was 19,
Hey,
so that's old
Jordan,
to me.
you haven't mastered getting the content right.
I've just lost all credibility on this
Let's go
point.
out to
Let's
coffee.
move on.
We'll do coffee after.
That's good.
You're good, Jordan.
There are actually some very good thoughts there. Don't waste their time. Can I also throw it in? Okay, let's forget age. And Ezra, I'm going to jump to you on this, the volunteer experience and some aspects of that. What about the university students? Are you conscious of when block exams are that you roster the university students off? Are you actually leading in for them? Because here's the thing. It's great that they are going to... they're going to serve on the kids ministry, but ultimately when they have been visited and spoken to and they feel called to make a difference, they're saved and they're called to make a difference in the education world. They're called to make a difference in the medical field. They're called to make a difference in the political or the science or whatever it might be. That's their calling, but yet we're so narrow-minded we think their only calling is fortnightly at the 10 a.m. service. And if we can release them to be bigger people, I want doctors, lawyers, teachers, part of my team, because what that experience brings into team management, what that brings in. But at the moment, they're not the older lawyers, they're the university student. Yeah. And we need to be thinking on how to be managing our team at large. And it does take, it takes time, it takes planning, it takes thinking out for that. But I think as much as not wasting their time, don't waste their time. And for the parents, multiple ones that have got kids, man, I am running to sport events. I used to hear parents talk about it, I'm a taxi, and I'm like, whatever. Now I'm a taxi, it's Uber. I'm just Uber driver. You're going from this to that, and you're running to sporting events and all sorts of things. And I'm thinking, well, okay, for my team that are parents like that, how to lead into that space. So I think it's wise what you're saying. Make sure your meetings count. Part of that, I would sum up, is within the volunteer experience. Ezra, can you talk us through, you've got some great things that you do with your volunteers.
Yeah, I'm pretty passionate about the volunteer experience because I was so terrible at it at the start. I wasn't a great uni student. I had 8 weeks to go and I just left uni thinking, I'll move across Australia, that will be fine. So I didn't really think through a lot of stuff, and at the start I wasn't great at it, but I believe my number one role in my Monday to Friday is to make Sunday really, really smooth and easy and thought out for every one of the volunteers who are giving their time to sow into the kids. So if I can really do everything I can in Monday to Friday to make Sunday just awesome for them and then walk away feeling like winners, they're going to come back next week. The goal is that everyone wants to feel like a winner. When they serve with you, they should feel like, now, kids are still going to vomit, things are still going to happen, but have you clearly defined what a win is for your team? We say it's discipleship, and we measure that 3 different ways. Did they open their Bible or know the memory verse? Did they pray, and do they know the bottom line for today? If you can get any one of those 3, you're a winner today. And we want you to know you're a winner every time you leave. And so we always say, like, if we can look after our volunteers in that, broken, it's all good. If we can look after our volunteers so that their Sunday isn't the most stressful part of their week, but it's the most enjoyable. I believe that they do the 38, 60 hours to pay their mortgage, but on Sunday they find their purpose. And so that's what I want all of our leaders to be doing, and it flows down, but it starts with me. And so what am I doing to make sure that these guys over here are having a great time every Sunday? And think about that in your Monday to Friday, because often we don't, and then we get to Sunday and we think they're just minions and worker bees to help us to have an easier Sunday for me. And that's not the point. I want to run hard on Sunday so that they have a great Sunday.
That's awesome. I think some of that also comes to what we've spoken about, thinking ahead and releasing them and preparing them in advance. Also, I think the other side of that is if you ask them to do something is setting them up with a budget to do something. You know that thing called a budget? Who doesn't know what I'm talking about when I say budget? Right. I mean, as in, sometimes the biggest argument used to be about churches, I haven't got any budget to do this and that. And you know what? I actually look across the nation, I think children's ministry is well equipped. And well resourced. We now have at most church planting conferences, they're talking about how important it is to start strong with children's ministry. So that the priority, and it is so important, but still it comes back to how much money we've got, and yet we're trying to do things well. Jace, you're good at doing things well on such a small budget. How to do something great with not much. And it's not to say you don't get much, it just means you get to do a whole lot more with what you've got. Yeah. I'm going to go onto the floor, and if you have just a minute or so to talk about that, I'll get any more questions. Put your hand up, I'll come down, you can ask the questions. So I'll head down there as you start, just to unpack a few ideas around that creativity of how to do great things on a small budget.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. I don't think it's anything deeply spiritual or anything. I mean, these guys have been saying some profound stuff. It's just a matter of like finding a good place to get good things printed. And it's about putting in the work to find a place to do it. Yeah. And not just saying yes to the first guy offers you badges for $100 or whatever. Like, we've often gone, okay, here's an idea we have. Let's sit down, work out, let's find the best place to get it from, who can do it the cheapest, who can do it for the best quality. Oftentimes, we've gone, there's a toy that's $10 and a toy that's $50, and we've bought the $10 toy, but it's been broken within a week. Where we could have probably saved up for 4 more weeks or 5 more weeks or a month. Or I mean, some churches here I know that you might have $10 a week as your budget. And like you can still run kids ministry with a small budget. Because kids ministry is not dependent on the money that's in the bank. It's dependent on our ability to give kids Jesus. And so for us, we've got to be very smart with the way we spend our money. And so we'd rather buy a slightly better toy at the start of a term than just buy rubbish every 2 weeks. The other thing, and I spoke about this before, it's a matter of being prepared. So like at the moment, I'm sitting down with some of our guys, and in about 2 weeks, I'm going to meet with them, and we're going to talk about at what points in the year next year do we want to spend money on what. So in February, we're going to buy all of our stationery. In April, we're going to buy toys. In June, we're going to buy this. So then we can save up money. We can make sure it's allocated right.
Yeah, it's great.
And then the other thing is we just show whether it's campus leadership or senior leadership, whoever needs to see it, this is how I'm being wise with the money that I've been given. Like I'm being a good steward. Ezra and I just recently, this is another cool one, we partnered up to get badges together so that the cost per badge was cheaper. We didn't need 10,000 badges each. But between us, we could partner up to get some badges for both of our kids' ministries. And so there's definitely people here I know that it's as easy as an email, a text, a phone call, and something on Instagram. Like, there's this company that I just hit up, like, hey, your playground's amazing. Can you tell us about it? We don't have to be embarrassed about the stage of or season of our ministry or how small we might think it is. Because what our small youth might think it is probably more significant than what you would imagine it really is.
Yeah.
And there's so many people who are prepared to help you if you just reach out.
Yep.
Oh, hello. Any questions? Great. I'm thrilled that it's the furthest one away. Did I mention I have a sore ankle?
For those of you that don't know, Andy used to be a really good rugby player, but then he hurt his ankle.
Let me clarify this. I was a good rugby player. I wasn't a great rugby player. I don't do my war stories, I could have made it. I know I couldn't. I went as far as I could. All of my injuries happen now because I can't give it up. Playing over 35s, it's ridiculous.
Hi, I just have a question about core team. Using young people from the youth ministry to buy into the kids ministry. How do you all navigate through that? Because, you know, with the young people in the youth ministry, they're really good at building relationship with each other, and they hang out, and they do their pizza and their things, and, you know, in that half-hour span, which they can just go do. But to build that kind of relationship with your kids team and actually getting your young people from the youth team to come into your kids win, because a lot of them do want to serve and are serving in our kids team, but I feel sometimes jealous that the youth team have got them all the time. You think, oh, but then they've got another meeting and I just want them to hang out with us because they're so cool. How do you navigate between the two ministries?
I can answer that one. I think it's having a healthy relationship with your youth pastor or youth leader. It's never going to work, no matter how cool you make your kids ministry and how fun it is to serve, if you're at war with your youth pastor or your youth leader. Like our youth pastor and I are really tight. We work side by side. We do programs together. Like a lot of stuff, our kids are the same exact age by a week. Like it's freaky. But we have a really close relationship. And so I say to him, hey bro, August is stacked. Like for youth, can you slow September down, for example, so that we can get some time with our guys? So that they're still getting sown into. I also know what he's speaking into the youth team. So that I can echo that and encourage that in the youth guys. Then he knows the same about what I'm speaking into the kids team. So we're not having two meetings saying the one thing. In fact, we did it a few weeks ago, and we think we're going to do it a few more times, is actually having generations team get-togethers. So there's a lot of people who we want serving in both, but we don't want them out 2 times in the week. So on a Sunday night after church, we put on food, we hung out together, we did a thing on additional needs ministries. That was the topic of the night. But any of my guys here would attest to the fact that it had such a healthy spirit about it. It didn't feel like there was kids on one side, like a his and hers side or anything like that. We were just all hanging out and everyone hung out and knew each other. But that comes from the relationship I have with our youth pastor, and it's flowed down from that.
Very cool. Hey, I think on that, at the national tour, Pastor James McPherson was talking about what senior pastors want. I think one is understanding budgets. If you are buying things, then talk to the youth department. You know, if it's a jumping castle or a big cost item, try and work together in order to share resources. I love that you're talking about calendar. Hey, slow it down here so we can push in there, which is brilliant. Another question. We'll take 3 more, and 2 if 1. That's good. Yes, I'll get there.
Thank you. With my kids pastor, do the rosters for our kids ministry. And we really want to honour our volunteers and their time that they sacrifice for our kids ministry. But we have a real issue with people just not showing up. And they say that they're keen, and we roster them on where they want to be on, and then they just don't show up. And I'm sure we're not the only ones, but how do you kind of go about that conversation or combat that, or, yeah?
You shoot them.
And if you don't have a gun, see Barry Newton.
You give them to the youth department. Look, I think the reality is that it all comes down to rostering is important so that we know on paper what we're going to have. But a roster system never works unless we've got full-on relationship with the people. So a roster is a tool, but it's not the way to make it happen. It's the way to put it on paper so you know you've got 8 workers for this amount of kids or whatever. You've got these people with the toddlers and these people with the primary school age kids. But at the end of the day, I think it's just some preparation and time and actually making the call to say during the week and not just another text or another email or just a waiting for you. You haven't responded to your PCO request. Why? Because we have to understand people's lives. We live and breathe it. They don't. I'm in full-time ministry. My husband alongside me is in ministry, but he doesn't work at church. And so I see the tension, the burden there when he's been rostered for things. He's like, I just didn't get a chance to look at my personal emails because all week I'm looking at work emails. But if someone had have rung me, like, it's just, I don't live in that space 24/7. I come home, I'm present for and my husband's a real where I am, I'm present, and I'm not thinking about every other thing. And so I think we have to respect people and just, hey, a phone call. But I think a lot of it does come out of that necessity of that thing called relationship. And that if people actually, and I think when you get on a track, a person gets a bit down the track with their volunteering experience, I think you can have the honest conversations about, hey, when you don't turn up, this is what it means for everybody else. But when they're first new to the team, they don't get that. They think, and don't see them as doing you a favour. You're actually helping them to fulfil the God-given purpose in their life. And I think if we can switch that, they're not doing you a favour. You're actually doing them a favour by allowing them, giving them the opportunity to outwork what God's put on their life. So, but I think relationships are a huge thing. And remember, a roster is a tool. It's not the end product.
Very good. One last question.
And when you roster them, give them a task to do when they get there. So that when you follow up, it's like, hey, you know, you were going to run the game and then you didn't show up and we had to get someone else in, but you would have been perfect for that game. I'm not beating you up. I'm saying, hey, you would have been awesome for that game and we really missed you. So if you can do things like that through a relationship, it would be fantastic.
Hello, how are we? Yes, question. In terms of when you're managing multiple campuses, my question is just around how do we make sure that our team culture is strong across campuses? In terms of small campuses, teams are smaller, less volunteers. The culture might not be strong. Do we send volunteers from mothership over? How often? Do we send a leader? Do we send a leader over to? So do we send leaders over, or do we build a team there? Do we raise someone up? How do we manage multiple campuses?
Can I speak into that? We're about to launch our 6th campus in Adelaide we've started, so we do lots of pre-launches and then we do a launch and then we do another launch and then we do another launch. But for a long period of time, so we 18 months ago started a campus way down south in Adelaide, and for 3 months we partnered with the team that were going to be there, and we sent a kids team every single Sunday night for 3 months. Let me tell you, for 3 months, my Sundays started at 7 a.m. and they finished at about 11 p.m. at night. But that's what we do because we actually want to inject culture into that new campus. And so until you build the team that's ready to carry it, obviously after a period of time you hope that you're putting enough vision into that new campus that you can pull back team and there's team picking up the slack. But you know, I love how we do campus because we're there to support each other. Yes. However, each campus has to be able to self-sustain after a period of time. Absolutely. We will walk with you and we'll hold your hand, absolutely, because you are us. But there has to come a time. So I won't get a call from Clark, who runs our South Campus, on a Sunday morning saying, hey, I'm down, can you send people? I'll be like, hell no. Like, get yourself organised. However, if Clark says to me, I'm going away for 3 months and I don't have this, this and this, we can work with him to make sure his campus has got what he needs. But yeah, so you definitely are resourcing, you definitely are providing for a period of time, but we've got to get our campus to a place where it is self-sustaining. Otherwise, we're going to die.
Can I ask a question? Who here is part of a church that's multi-site? Hold your hand up. Thank you. That was purely personal. I was just wondering. Next year, I'm going to run a 2-day event here on the Gold Coast, and you will have to fly here yourself. You will have to accommodate yourself for one night. But we're going to spend 2 days, and we're going to talk multi-site. And I would love to invite the key kids pastors and campus leaders to that. Who would be interested in that? Okay, there's 6 of us. Cool, we're going to have fun. No, there's a number more. But I want to talk multi-site because we've all been talking this week about multi-site, and I know it's becoming more. and it's a biblical model of how we run church, and it's great. But what I find, to answer that question also, and something I want to continue to explore around multi-site is each of our churches are all experimenting and finding how you're doing this at the moment. And each system is slightly different on how you're doing it. One of the greatest things within Calvary is that we're too far apart that we can't just send someone from Mothership. That's in Townsville. Hey, can you just be down on the Gold Coast? Sure, I'll get in the car. 2 days ago. One thing that when you're running multi-site that's not in the same city is you have to create a truer economy in some sense. When you're in the same city, it's a little bit of a false economy that you've got a broader team than what you do because you keep propping each other up. And I know that we have to support, but ultimately, if we were too far to send someone, could you sustain that? Which therefore, your question around culture is so important of how we do this. And that is communication. I think Ezra said it, I stole it, and I've used it everywhere. But if he didn't say it, it's back to me. But you've got expectation and you've got communication, and this gap in between is called frustration. And basically, if you close the gap on communication, that's the key. And you're not getting failed expectations on others. My kids' leaders, we meet fortnightly, and we want to keep talking into it. What you have to define when you're doing multi-site is what the responsibilities of Central is. So I know at Calvary, and I'll just talk purely from us, which may help you a little bit, is that none of my campus directors of kids ministry can choose that we're suddenly just going to do this curriculum. A curriculum is set centrally. And no one can come up with a cool clip art logo and use it for a team. Branding is central. So the look, the feel, the teaching, the safety components. You can't just check the kids in after the service. And 3 people wrote that down. I was so surprised. You can't do that. So we have that, but then we have what's collaborative and how we work as a team. Oh, you're doing an art and craft on that particular, put it in a Dropbox, let's share ideas. And we can get better at this, and I'm not saying by any means of we're still growing this. But then what's local is rostering, it's pastoral care, it's team development, it's knowing these aspects. Functions will shift, but heart and culture is what remains. And I'm not going to sit here and argue with Adam if they're outworking a particular thing in one of the age group rooms on this. If that's working for them, great. But what I'll fight is when it's culturally different to who Calvary Kids is. And so your question of how do you do culture, you have to stay on top of it. You have to talk about it. You have to repeat it. You have to communicate it. We do our collaborative with our kids leaders fortnightly. We, throughout the year, want to get all of our teams via a Zoom call and do a one leadership training to all of our teams in one room and connect together. We want to get to these events, Kidshaper and other kids ministry events that we can continually train. We use this week, and on the Friday, we'll all get together and spend a day together to talk Calvary. And it'll be reaffirming culture and what we do and how we're doing it. Then it's reliant upon the campus guys to be communicating that to their team leaders. And that's the balance on that. But I think we're moving into a space, and one question of over the next 10 years, well, I think multi-site is going to continue to expand and how to manage that. So the model and the way that you do it is obviously going to be reflective of how your senior leader wants to set this up and manage it. But for us, we've found that's how we are, and I'd love to explore further conversations. And throughout this week, if you're wanting to sit down and have a coffee and talk a little bit multi-site, I'd love to talk about that until we set some event where we can collaboratively get together. I'd love to learn off you as well of how you're doing multi-site, which would be brilliant. Hey, can we put our hands together and thank these guys? Thank you very much.